Good evening. Welcome to Neighborhood Snapshot, a series of programs that details the past history of Leominster, Massachusetts. My name is Carl Pimerini. I'll be your host for tonight, taking the place of historian Bob Saudelli. And tonight we have a very special show because we have a lifelong resident of Leominster here with us in the studios. And I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Emile Brosseau. Emile, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Emile, let's go way back. Let's go back to your beginnings of the neighborhood that you lived in Leominster, and let's go back to what year were you born?
I was born in 1914 in Leominster, Massachusetts, the last house on Water Street. And we moved from there. We went over to 3rd Street, 44 3rd Street, where I lived till about I was 7 years old. And I made my first communion in the old church. It was an old house where the St. Cecilia's Church is now. And I made my first communion there when I was 7 years old.
So you're pretty much, your younger life was spent on French Hill, mostly all in the French Hill area.
Yes.
What can you tell me about the house you lived in when you were born in that house on Water Street at the end? How many houses were on Water Street at that time? Do you remember?
Well, there weren't too many, but that was the last house on Water Street, which overlooks Searstown from the back of the house. And but that was an old neighborhood, so there were quite a few houses there.
Okay. Were there any farms in that area? Any type of farm?
We had a farm on corner 3rd Street, and that I believe that Derwin Farm, and he had a few cows in that, and there was a small farm there on 3rd Street.
Now, you seem to know a lot about that farm. Did you spend time there as a kid? Did you?
No, but I did work on a farm when I was 11 years old, and this farm was located on 9th Street across from Cody's Junkyard, and they housed 56 cows and 1 bull, and they were not pasteurized, pastured, and they stayed in the barn all the time, and we would milk them, and then that was raw milk then. We didn't have no pasteurization then. Mm-hmm. So I worked there when I was 11 years old.
Now, before we get too much about your childhood, let's talk a little bit about, if you can recall, some history of your parents. Were your parents born in this country, or did they come
No,
in?
my father was born in Saint-Emile in Canada, and my mother was born in just 10 miles away from there. I forget the name of the town. And my father was born in 1882. My mother was born in 1883.
And do you know what year approximately they came to this country?
Yeah, about 1901. My father came down from Canada and went to Clinton. He lived with his brother there, and my father worked on the dam, the Clinton Dam.
Okay.
And my mother also had moved to Clinton, and she was a Devani. Her name was Devani, maiden name was Devani. And my uncle married one of the sisters, and my father married the other sister. So, and that was in about 1902 or 3.
Okay. Now, your family, you had a very large family. How many brothers and sisters were there?
We had 11 children, 7 boys and 4 girls.
7 boys and 4. So you had plenty of brothers to fight with and spar around with.
Right.
Plus you had sisters also. So 11. Now growing up, were they all born in that same area? Were they all born in that same area, Water Street?
Mostly all on the French Hill area. Okay. They were born.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, at what point about, what do you remember, what are some of your recollections growing up as a child in that area? What did you do for recreation, for play,
Well, there wasn't too much to do around that time, but we used to go out in the fields and in the back of the house and that, and this man was raising chickens, and the chickens get away from him, and they laid eggs in the little cave, and we used to go up there and take the eggs out and bring them home. So There wasn't too much to do, but I do recall during the wartime, First World War, we were living on 3rd Street then, and I remember 1921, the Welcome Home Parade, which was on French Hill, and it was quite a parade. They had a big arch in front of the school, big wooden arch, and my sister Gert was on that arch, and my brother Alfred was also on there, and they were throwing flowers at the procession as they went through there.
Now, what school did you attend? What grade school?
I attended St. Cecilia's School, and I left there in the 8th grade to go to work because there was no one working in the family. We were very, and I got a job at DuPont's in 1929, and I started at 25 cents an hour.
25 cents an hour. Do you remember, before we get into your DuPont years, do you remember your first job as a child?
That was my first job.
That was your first job?
Yes.
Okay.
It was my only job.
Okay. How old were you when you started that? You were
15.
15 at DuPont. Now, you had mentioned St. Cecilia's School. Was that located in the same building where it is today?
Yes, it was, yeah. But they put on an addition, after I left,
Right.
They put on an extra addition on that school.
Okay.
And,
now, was the church in existence at that point?
Well, they had the old church on 3rd Street where I made my first communion.
Right.
It was a house
Right.
turned into a church.
That was the original St. Cecilia's.
Yeah, that was
church.
Father Balthazar that was there.
Wow, you can remember that.
Yeah.
Some of these names from the past.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of, did you participate in any sports as a kid growing up? Any
Our family
football,
wasn't
baseball?
too sports
Okay.
in the sports too much. We done ice skating and things like that, but we weren't in football or baseball or anything like that.
Were you a more musical type of family? or-
Yes, we were. We had quite a little time there. We had kind of a little. My brother played the guitar. My father played the violin. And he played the accordion, and I played a little guitar and ukulele also. And we'd get together and have some good times together.
That sounds good. Okay, so you started working at 15
That's right.
at DuPont. What can you remember about that, about working, what the conditions were like?
Well, at that time, it was just before the Depression, in 29, and in 1930, they cut my pay down from 25 cents an hour to 18 cents an hour because of the Depression. And then I started up after that, and I got a job. I was working in what they call scraping combs. And what it was is a comb that was a press comb and left the film in between each teeth. And you had to get that out of there, and you had to scrape them to do that.
Okay.
And then they put them in a tumbler, and they would finish the combs from there. And then later on, in 1934, I asked to be transferred to the molding department. And I went in the molding department in 1934, and I worked there, and then I asked to go on the floor to be a mechanic, which they did, and I stayed mechanic there for till 1942.
So you got involved in the plastics industry right about when it really started taking off.
That's right.
and all this stuff. So when you first started working at DuPont, were they still using were they using actual plastic resin back then? or were they-
Yeah, what we call it celluloid or paralon. Okay,
right.
Celluloid. And
So they had already switched to
that was
celluloid.
made. That celluloid was made from gun cotton. It was very explosive, and we went through a lot of explosions there. I did too.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, very much so. I got blown across the room one time, 16 feet, by an explosion. Yeah.
So it was a very dangerous.
Well, it's all gun cotton. That's the reason for it. Yeah.
Now, how many people worked at DuPont?
Well,
Can you estimate at that
1929, they had about 3,000 people working there.
3,000.
Yeah.
So most of French Hill was probably employed. I mean, people pretty much stayed in their own neighborhoods.
Yeah,
at
and
that
it
time.
was a family type company. If you one of the family get in there, and then the next one you get in, and then it was
Right.
That's
how
what
it
happened.
worked. Many generations of
That's right.
family members would work at
Right.
the same place. What else can you tell me about DuPont? They manufactured combs and plastic, small novelty type.
Hairbrushes,
Right.
Electric toothbrushes we manufactured also in later years. And I had a lot to do with that Reach toothbrush. I developed all the colors and the Reach toothbrushes, and I worked with the people from, doctors from Boston, and they worked with me with the colors and everything. So I had quite a bit to do with that Reach toothbrush.
Okay. Let's go back a little bit. At the time, you started working at 16.
15.
15. You worked there for how many years?
46 years.
46 years. Now, at what point did you got married and started your own family? What point was
Well,
that?
I started, 1935, I married my wife Irene, and at that time I was earning $14.40 a week. Well, actually $16 a week, but by the time the take-home pay was $14.40. And I worked on that until after 2 years from there, they gave me a 4-cent an hour raise.
Right.
So I kept going up until, actually in 1942, they offered me a foreman job. And so I came home and talked to my wife about it, and I decided I'd take it because there was more money in my pocket to take home. So, and but in 1930, I'll go back a little bit.
Yeah.
1936 and 37, I went and worked in New Jersey for DuPont.
Oh, yeah.
I was teaching the isomer injection machine. It's a very small machine. It's only about 3 ounces. It produced only about 3 ounces. It was more for color chips and things like that. We did have small molds, little barrette molds that we put in there. But I went to New Jersey, and I stayed there about a month, and I was teaching them how to set up the machine, put in the molds, actually run the molds. And this machine, it was so small that you could bring it in your home. If you had a 220 plug, you could plug it in there and start molding immediately, because it was all electrical. Everything was electrical, no hydraulics to it.
Around that same time, the mid-1930s or so, what was life like in Leominster? Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, they didn't have supermarkets and Kmart's and things like that.
We didn't have them.
So when your wife, say, went grocery shopping, can you tell us a little bit of how that works? There would be a corner store, or?
No, with Uptown, it was more or less Brockman Brothers. Okay. That's what we did. So at that time when I got married, I lived on Adams Street. Okay. So we used to walk down to Brockman Brothers and get our groceries, and $5 worth, we had a hard time carrying it home. So
where was Brockman's now?
Brockman's was where, let's see, where that restaurant is uptown.
Okay.
There.
Monument Grill?
Monument Grill.
Okay.
Just about in that area. And Sabatelli's was next to that.
Do you remember, yeah, I was going to ask you, do you remember some of the other stores that were uptown at that time?
Yeah, and we could, we didn't have too many stores to go to, but Brockman's was our main store because it was so close to us. That's the reason why we went there.
Now, what about clothes? Where'd you get your clothing and that type of thing?
Lubin's, that's where we bought our clothing.
Okay.
Yeah, we bought a lot of clothing.
That was right downtown also.
Right downtown.
For many years. Same thing with hardware supplies. Was there a hardware store downtown?
Yes,
also?
there was a hardware store. Now I can't recall just which one it was. But there was one a little further up from Sabatelli's store. Okay. There was a hardware store there.
I just mentioned this because a lot of our viewers don't realize that the town was the center of activity.
That's right.
You had the individual neighborhoods like French Hill and the other neighborhoods where the neighbors would congregate. But when they went shopping, I mean, the big thing to do was to go downtown.
Because you had Allen's store, you had that one there where you buy clothing also, and you had quite a few stores. It was all in town. Everything was in town. We didn't have these supermarkets where you drive to, and that. Of course, we didn't have a car either, so we couldn't drive there. So,
And again, all the modern conveniences. You didn't have dishwasher and clothes washer.
That's right.
Everything was done by hand.
Yeah.
When did you get your first automobile? Your first car?
well, I bought my first. It was a truck actually. It's a little Ford truck. I bought it in 1947. It was 1942. So I paid $400 for it. But
that was your first vehicle. Now, did your father? Did he have a car?
No, my
right
father
away?
never had a car. None
Oh, yeah?
of it.
Well,
No.
so the family just pretty much walked wherever they had to go?
Everywhere. My father worked at the Richardson Piano Case Company, and he'd walk to work, and my brother Phil also would walk to work from Mechanic Street up to Richardson Piano Case Company, which was on not Main Street.
Right.
So,
It was definitely a different type of time back then.
oh yes, yeah. But you've done a lot of walking too.
Now, we had mentioned some of the farms in the area. There was a lot of farms in the area at that time. Can you remember some of the names of some of the farms during that time?
Well, the name of that farm that I worked on, that was Bill Boudreau, William Boudreau. He had that farm.
Okay.
And like I say, we had 56 cows in there, you know. I'd help them to milk and feed the cows and everything else. But that was the only farm we had directly
Right in that
around
area.
that time, except Sherwin Farm on 3rd Street.
Right. But on the outskirts of Leominster, you had some of the other bigger farms like Sholin.
Yeah, they had like Gold's Farm, but it wasn't. Gold's Farm was on Rice Hill.
Right.
But I don't remember if Gove had it way back.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the people that had it at that time.
Right. There was Derby Farm.
Derby Farm. That was Derby just before that.
Right, just before that. And there was a couple other smaller farms, I think, on Pleasant Street, wasn't there? Up and down.
Yeah, right. They had
Voss
Voss Farm, and then they had I can't think of
Yeah, I
his
can't
name.
remember the name.
Italian people had it up there on Pleasant Street on the hill.
Right. Heading up toward Sholin, like you're heading up toward
Yeah,
Sholin.
right.
Yeah, I
Right.
remember-
They
I
had
remember that
quite a
farm.
farm up there too. Yeah.
Now, did you, I mean, in later years, we'll get to this, where you kind of focused a lot of your attention to farming and that type of thing. But growing up, did you do a lot of, did you have a garden? at the
Oh,
house
I had
all
a
the time?
garden since I was 10 years old.
Okay.
And I raised when I lived on Mechanic Street, I raised about 100 and 125 rabbits. Wow. And well, I'd raise them for the food for the family. And I had chickens. And my father built me a hen house, but it came from the old Saudelli Bridge that was on Mechanic Street. At that time, we called it the Red Bridge. It was all a wooden bridge, but they tore it down and built the one that's there now. But my father got the wood for me. He made me a chicken coop, so I started raising chickens. So to help out in there.
So you always had a garden to kind of supplement
yes.
the food coming in for the family or whatever all the time.
Yeah. Well, I had a garden also in my summer home in Westminster, and it was right by the lake. And I'd pump the water from the lake into the garden, and I raised watermelons, 18 pounds each up there. They were good-sized watermelons, and people would come to my dock and buy my tomatoes and beans and everything else. So I had a little store up there,
I know we keep jumping around chronologically in time here, different eras, but you were born on Water Street. You moved a couple times. Can you tell me anything about the Howard Street house?
Well, I moved from Water Street to 3rd Street, which was a two-family house, and we lived there quite a while, until I was about 7 years old. Okay. Then we moved to Mechanic Street, 295 Mechanic Street, right. And that was a dirt road, by the way, going down to Mechanic Street, down the hill, past Escalade Avenue. It was all dirt road, and so we stayed there, and then we We stayed in that house, and then we moved to 297 Mechanic Street, which was the house next door. And we stayed there quite a while. And then we moved from there to Howard Street. And that's, I stayed there till I got married. And I got married from Howard Street. Then my family moved to Cottage Street after that.
The Howard Street house has a kind of a strange, there's been books written about that house. About any strange happenings ever happened to you when you were in that house?
No, not that I remember of.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I remember of. It was a two-family house.
Yep.
And the Bertrons lived downstairs.
Right.
And we lived up on the second floor.
Okay.
So-
Okay. It was a pretty small house.
Yes, it
Yeah.
wasn't too big of a house.
Wasn't too big of a house. Well, that's a subject for another whole documentary in itself. But I just want to know from you if anything strange had happened to you while you were in that house. Okay, let's switch gears now. Okay, you've been working at DuPont for 46 years.
6 years.
Okay. You started your own family. You have how many children?
I had 2 children.
Okay.
I had Lorraine and Gary.
Okay.
And that was my 2 children. But they were about 8.5 years apart. Lorraine was born in 36, and Gary was born in 45.
Okay. Okay. So you raised your family. You did well at DuPont. So what happens? You spend 46 years at DuPont, and then what did you think about retiring after that, or?
Well, I come to retire in the end of 1974, and they come up and ask me to stay on. So I said, what's the point? Why do you want me to stay on? He said, we'd like you to go into the engineering department. Well, I said, for what reason? Well, he says, I had a couple of engineers working on some molds that we wanted to automate, and they didn't do too well. He says, we think you can do it. So I said, what molds are you thinking of? So he gave me 5 molds. I said, well, I can automate 4 of them molds. I said, one of them I can't because of the gate size to it. And they were hairbrushes, that's what they were. So I did my job. Within 4 or 5 months, I automated 4 of the molds. Then they still wanted me to stay on. That brought me into April of 1975. I retired April 30th, 1975. And I know why they wanted me to stay on, because they knew that they were going to sell the company, and I would have got $25,000 more plus my pension if I'd have stayed on. But I decided I wanted to leave. So I went up in the office and I put my name in. Said, why do you want to leave? He said, you not feeling right? I said, no, I feel great. That's the reason why I want to leave. So I left in 1975.
Before we leave the whole DuPont question, can you tell us a little bit more about what was it like working at DuPont? Did all the workers get along? What was the whole atmosphere like?
That was a really family type factory, and we got along real good all the way around. We had no problems whatsoever.
Was it a union?
It was inside union.
Okay.
It was a factory union. See, and like I said, I became foreman in 1942, and I had about 30 people working for me. Mm-hmm. And I had all the 1943 and that, I had all the Italian people working for me. All of them are from all over, believe me.
Right.
Yeah, and we had a great time. Like I used to tell them, I'd have to give a talk every month or so on. And like I told them, I said, make my job easier, you do your job. So I said, we'll get along fine. But I said, if you don't do your job, I'll be right after you.
Now, what was DuPont like during the war? Did they go into any kind of war production?
Well, we had 5% war production. It was making combs and toothbrushes for the service, for the Army and Navy and the rest of the Marines and that.
That was it? There was no parts for
no,
planes or
no
anything like no plastic?
And I was deferred 9 times because of my key job in there.
Now, what were some of the changes in DuPont over the years? Did you notice over the years any great changes in how that company worked? Was there times where there were great layoffs or?
I'll tell you a story about a layoff. One day they gathered us all up with 75 people in a room, and they said, Emile, you go over there. Val Pimerini, you go over there. He says, the rest of you go home, you're all laid off. So they laid off 73 people that day, and we stayed on. And I went right through the 46 years, and I never got laid off from DuPont.
What year was that when they laid off the 70s something?
Well, that was about 1934.
Did you see any changes when a lot of these other smaller plastic factories started up all around town? Like you had your Plastic Academy, which
well, we had 76. We had 76 plastic companies in
76.
In Leominster, and of course our rival was Foss and Grant's.
Right.
So Foss and Grant's and us worked pretty close together. But every time DuPont gave a raise, Foss and Grant had to give a raise, because if they didn't, they'd lose their people to us. So it wasn't. That was that type of combination. See.
So you were there pretty much through the whole, you were there from the changeover from Leominster being a farming community to the plastic community, and then going from plastics, it's changed now. I mean, you don't have all the plastic companies working like they
No.
Why do you suppose that came about?
Well, larger companies, first place. You had much larger companies. So they'd eliminate some of the other companies because they couldn't put up with it because the cost. So the larger companies would take over, and some of the smaller companies would drop out. And that's the reason why now you have maybe 12 different plastic companies here in Leominster. I don't know, but I'm just about guessing that part.
Do you think part of it has to do with the whole labor industry and how how they import workers, cheaper labor from out of town?
Well, yes, from out of country, more or less, like Japan and China and Korea and all them. All them places are producing at much lower cost than we do. And they ship them over here and sell them, and that's the reason why a lot of these companies dropped out too.
Okay, let's talk. You retired in '75, you said?
1975.
Okay. When you were retired, then what was your next phase in life? What did you?
Francis Bartolomeo, who owns Bart's Farm, was working for me at the time. And when I come to retire, he said, "Why don't you come and work for me?" So I said to him, "Well, I'll go work for you if you treat me like I treated you in the shop." So that's how I went and worked for Bart. And I went and worked for Bart for 17 years. And Bart and I built 2 of the greenhouses up there. And I done all types of work for him. I painted all the signs for him. I done machinist work for him because I had a machine shop and the carpenter shop at home. And I repaired the tractors and done plumbing work for him and electrical. We had it all. And I managed the strawberry fields, and on Union Street and Central Street. I managed the strawberry fields for him on the U-picks, and that's how we started U-pick on the U-pick strawberries.
Now, is his farm still in operation now?
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay.
He sold 30 acres to Bavenzi, and Bavenzi, within next probably 4 or 5 years, will buy the rest of the farm. That was the agreement. So Bart is still there, and he don't grow much. He grows a few tomatoes, and he's got a lot of raspberries, and it's a berry farm, more or less. Raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, and things like that.
Yeah, I've had them. They're very, very good berries.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears. Now you find yourself at Sholin Farms. How did that come about?
Well, I said to my family, I says, I'm going to go work at Shoreham Farm. I'm going to donate my time. So I drove up one day, and there was Tom Bissonette sitting at the table there. Well, I didn't know the man, but I walked up to him and I says, "How do I get, to donate my time to it?" So, oh boy, he says, "You get your name and address, and all this." And then that's how I started there. And I do most of all the carpenter work up there. I built one hayride trailer for him in 202. It was all white oak. Bart donated the chassis, and I built the trailer. But that burnt up with the barn and the fire, at that fire.
Yeah, that was a very sad day. You know,
Yeah.
we had that beautiful barn that they were planning to restore.
That's right.
And were you involved in the planning at all of the restoration of that barn?
No.
Okay.
No, I wasn't, no.
Okay. And so, unfortunately, the barn was burned down. What are the plans now? Are they going to
Well,
eventually
right now,
rebuild?
we put up a sales barn, which is a post and beam barn, and it's 16 by 32. And we finally got the roof on in the last month, and we're using that now until the end of this season, which will be this month. And we're using it as a sales barn. But the other barn, we got several choices of either moving the barn to replace the barn that burnt down.
Right.
And so I don't know what they're going to decide just now. But
How many apple trees are there?
10,000 apple trees. They were 10,000 apple trees when we first got there.
Okay.
And we cut down probably 200, 250 apple trees a year,
Right.
the ones that we were not producing. But we have 2,800 bearing apple trees right now, and we're planting more of them. They planted 50 trees last year of the Honey Crisp, and we're going to plant more of them coming up.
So the trees that are there, not all of them are in condition to bear fruit.
That's right.
Can the ones that have gone past, can they be kind of brought back, or is it a different?
No, I don't think they could. It'd be very hard for them to come back on there. So we probably don't need any more than 3,000 trees anyway, to get what we want out of it.
So you're constantly taking the old growth out and planting new trees to kind of keep things at a
this year we're taking out the Vistabellas, and we're taking out the Jersey Max. We have 9 varieties of apples up there, just about 9 varieties.
Very good. So, what are your future plans? Are you going to continue working up there? or-
Yes, I'll continue. I'll stay there.
Now, how many hours a day do you work?
Well, I work 3, 4, 5 hours a day, sometimes 6, depending what I'm doing. So I just recently finished another trailer farm, another hayride trailer. And the chassis of that, or the bottom part of that, was donated by Frank Finn of Sterling.
Okay.
And I just rebuilt it all. And Frank Finn come up with his horses. He has horses and hayride also. And he come and look at it. He says, "Geez, can I buy it back?" He liked to buy it back after I finished it. I made folding steps for it in the back, and I've done a lot of work in it.
Well, I'm sure it'll get a lot of use, up there where all the
Oh,
kids,
yes,
the
definitely.
schools going up and visiting the farm. And, yeah. So, you work 6 hours a day up there.
About,
and you're
yeah.
89 years old?
I'm 89.
And what do you do for rest? Do you slow down at all? Do you?
I don't too much. When I go home, I do some work in my cellar. So I keep.
So you keep busy all the time.
Well, that's the secret in life.
Yeah.
I was going to say that. The secret in life, I feel, my opinion of it, is that keep your mind busy and your body busy. It's 90% of the battle. So that's why I do it. I'm in great health, very good health. So I'm going to continue.
Well, very good. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. And I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us a little insight on what Leominster was like. Before we leave, can you turn the clocks back one more time, okay? What is your fondest memory of growing up in Leominster? Can you remember? What is one of the things that really stands out that you really
Well,
enjoyed the
living
most?
on 3rd Street was because it was during the wartime, and we moved there. See, I was born in 14, and we moved out of there when I was in 1920, 21. And but I was just a youngster, and that was a great memory to us, because to me, because of the situation we had there, you know, the family growing up, and
Just being all together
That's
as a
right.
family.
right.
And unfortunately, you don't find that too much anymore. You know,
No,
the
right,
families scatter, and it's not like
And
it.
for a family, we got along very, very well.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I thank you very much, Mr. Brosseau,
Thank you.
and thank you for being on Neighborhood Snapshot. And that's all for tonight, and good night.